Hello everyone and welcome to the Authoritas Tea Time Halloween special. Thank you very much for coming to our Ultimate SEO Guide series. Today we're all going to be talking about e-commerce SEO. I do hope everyone has brought their tea and maybe a Halloween treat to share with us today. Very good. And we're actually having another international Tea Time SEO because we have Maria in Valencia, James is in Staines, Larissa's in Munich, Germany, Carrie Shepherd's in Putney, London, and I am in Barcelona, Spain. So true international tea time today. So I wanted to just first of all say thanks to the audience for joining us today. I'm SEO Joe Blogs from Authoritas and joined by Carrie Shepherd from Authoritas in the marketing team. And we know how much time and work goes into organizing an event. So we're partnering up with Talk Digital. So this is an event that's been organized since June by Mark and Chris. And they have an event every month for a couple of hours from 7 p.m. And the next event that's taking place actually is on November the 12th, all around content marketing and also e-commerce with Rebecca Dunn and Christina Azarenko, who both have joined us on for Tea Time SEO. So today we are joined by Maria, James, and Larissa, who's going to share their tips all about e-commerce SEO, what you can do, everything from duplicate content to page speed. So if you do have any questions, please drop them in the chat and we will answer them afterwards. And also, if you're enjoying the Tea Time SEO series, subscribe to the channel and like this video because we like to, we appreciate the time given up by our speakers and we want obviously to show the appreciation with some of the nice likes. So without further ado, I'm just going to introduce to some of the speakers.
Hello, everyone. My name is Maria. I am a senior SEO consultant at Build Visible. It's a digital agency based in London. I joined there about 3 years ago, and I'm on the technical SEO team there. I'm mostly specialized on site speed optimization and e-commerce SEO, and I work across a variety of projects and a variety of clients, but most of them are e-commerce websites. I've done some training in the past at Brighton SEO and a few speaking events, which I really enjoy. So thank you for joining me today.
And you were doing the training last week as well, weren't you, Maria?
Yes, so on e-commerce SEO as well. So yeah, I'm getting more and more specialized on this topic, which I really enjoy.
Great. And if there's any other training that you're doing, can you share that with us in the chat or on Twitter maybe later?
Sure. Yeah. We are actually doing a webinar soon as well on e-commerce and a couple of blog posts. So yeah, definitely I will share some later on.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm James. So I'm an independent e-commerce consultant. I focus on replatforming. So I feel like a bit of a charlatan. I'm amongst SEO experts here, and SEO is part of what I do, but I focus on e-commerce strategy predominantly. So I do a lot of work with clients when they're launching new sites or moving from platform to platform to look at the e-commerce implications of decisions. So I work with a lot of B2C, B2B clients. I also run a rather niche podcast called Replatform.fm, focus on all things to do with replatforming. So we've had a few of the well-established SEO community on there, like Aleda Solis. So hopefully you will enjoy some of the content from that podcast. So looking forward to discussing and learning from Larissa and Maria as well.
But you also do the e-com chat as well, don't you, on Mondays?
Yes, yeah, we do.
Mondays at 1 p.m.
Yes, it is with Dan Barker, who's a ridiculously smart chap.
Great. Well, yeah, there were some good questions this week as well.
Hi, my name is Larissa. I've been working in SEO for about 7 years, mainly as an in-house SEO manager, focused on tech and content related topics. And yeah, I actually really like supporting new people in the SEO industry, but also getting other teams like the product team or UX team enthusiastic about SEO. I'm currently actually enjoying a small break before I'm starting a new challenge on November 1st, so next week, actually.
Oh, are you able to share what you're doing November the 1st, or should we wait till
So I'll be working for a website in the meteo or weather industry in Germany.
Oh, great. Excellent. Well, thank you to our speakers. Thanks also, Sarah, for tuning in, Azim, Raphael, and everyone else not signed in. We'll pass over to Maria and the speakers to then share their tips.
Hello. So my top tips today are all going to be around duplicate and thin content. And the reason why I chose this topic is because I feel like most of the e-commerce sites, this is one of the topics that I see they struggle with more. So we will look at stuff around how you can make more room for content on your category and product page templates, how you should be avoiding having like different the page on different URL paths, and how to avoid thin category pages and so on. So yeah, so the first tip I have today is you should be creating only different categories and product pages when two rules apply. And this is, the first one is there should be search demand justifying the existing of these two pages. So for example, let's say you sell shampoos and you have each product on different sizes, but you realize that there is actually no search demand behind those different sizes. So in this case, you shouldn't be creating two different URLs, and you should consolidate all the different sizes under a single product URL. But for example, in the opposite side, if you are selling, for example, dresses, and you realize that there's search demand around colors, like people searching for black dresses, red dresses, and so on, in that case, then there's definitely an opportunity for you to have those product variations under different color URLs. However, then you have to ask yourself the second question: do you have the resources and do you have the template to create for these pages to have enough unique content for them not to be considered duplicates? If so, then go ahead and create those on different URLs. But if you don't, if those pages are not going to have enough unique content because you don't have the resources or the page template don't allow for it, then you shouldn't be creating these. And the reason why is because then Google and search engines will see these as duplicates. And here on the, I don't know if you can read it properly, but on the on the bottom picture on the right-hand side, we have a real-world example where one of our e-commerce clients had over 9,000, exactly there, where they had over 9,000 URLs, which were too similar from each other. They were products on different colors that were too similar and were considered duplicate by Google, and they were basically not indexed. So this actually brings me to the next tip on the next slide, which basically, if you decide to have them in two different URLs and to actually have, like, you really want to go for those searches and those long tail variations, then you should make room for content on your product page template. So there's different ways in which you can do this in a kind of at scale or in a quick way. So adding user-generated content, like for example, product reviews, is a very good way to do this. Product reviews can be a source of content, with unique and fresh content, and also a source of relevant content for your product pages at scale. Like if you see on the left image as well, you will see how reviews can be a really good way for adding lots of targeted keywords in a natural way. So this can be really good for increasing your rankings for your keywords. Also, similar to this, allowing customers to leave questions and answering them can be a really good way and work in a similar way to product reviews. Other things like having product markup, which would tell Google more details on your products, like color, sizes, the aggregate rating as well. Having videos showing the users how to use the product, for example, can be good for ranking for longer tail versions around how-to keywords, which are really good keywords to target because they are usually entered by users, like potential customers who are very interested on buying, but they might have some questions around the product. And other things like if you have related articles or you have fitting guides or stuff like that, add links to those as well and add them incorporate those on your product page templates. And finally, having links to related products at the end of the product page is also a really good idea. Related products or accessories. This is a really good way, for example, like not all of the customers that will end up landing on your product page will be a good fit for that product. So it's always a good idea to provide some alternatives in case they are not really interested or they are not convinced about that product, so that they end up buying something else instead. However, probably your e-commerce sites tend to be really high and tend to have lots of URLs, so it won't be very easy to those kind of features are a really good way for doing this at scale. But if you really want your top products, your top revenue generators to have unique and high value, high quality descriptions, so I would suggest you to take the top 20 products, the top 20 revenue generators are under each subcategory and category on your site, and add product descriptions that are unique for these products. So these should be helpful for users, but at the same time contain enough information for search engines to understand the product and the page. So avoid things like having descriptions that are taken from manufacturer sites, and put your resources to write unique descriptions for these. So some of the things that you can include are, if you don't know what things you can include, or don't feel creative, talk about what's the product made of, what's the material, if it has any features, things about the size, the color, how is the packaging, what's the size of the packaging, if there are any specific care instructions, how the product can be used for, and all of these kind of things will add a uniqueness to the content. Of course, ensure that your top targeted keyword is in there, but make sure that you add synonyms and long tail variations so that it reads natural for users. Then the next one is about avoiding having product listing pages that are too thin and have only one or two products. For example, having these at scale can be really bad for a few reasons. One of them is that search engines see these pages as thin content and low quality, which is not good. And then the other problem is that these product listing pages tend to compete with the actual product pages themselves. So as a kind of rule of thumb, I would recommend don't creating any category pages that have around 4 products. And if you feel even if there is search demand to create a subcategory, if you feel that you are not going to have enough product offering for that page, then don't create it. Don't go that granular. If they really have to exist, because, for example, seasonality, sometimes you will have a product listing page that have lots of products, and then when it's not in season, that page is very low in stock, for example, and only have a couple of products in them, then that's totally fine. But just make sure that you tackle this kind of content as part of a wider product retirement strategy. And finally, improving the category page templates is also something that you can, same that we did for products, you can do the same for category pages, and try to make room on that page template to avoid having thin and duplicate content there. And finally, the last tip is avoiding having the same page accessible via different paths. So, for example, if you have a product that fits under 2 categories, just make sure that the URL is unique and it's only accessible via 1 URL. Or the same if you have a product or a category that is accessible via different facet order. So someone selecting a color and then the size, or someone selecting sizes and then the color. Make sure that you enforce a specific facet order for URLs to prevent the same page being accessible via different paths. And this will prevent from exponentially increasing the number of URLs created by different facet combinations. So that's all from me. I'm going to hand over to James now.
Thanks, Maria. Yeah, some really good practical advice there. And a few of my tips actually are kind of aligned with that. And I'm coming at it from the angle of replatforming. So the things that people often don't think about enough when they're doing site migrations or moving from one technology to another. So if we move on to tip number 1, which is about site navigation labeling. This is a key one for me. It's about thinking about shopper language when you think about your main menus, your navigation, filter labels, etc. The table on the right was from a case study I worked on with Mars, and Mars did a lot of work on an online grocer to look at shopper language versus business language, and realised that they had some real misalignment with the terminology that some users use to shop for particular types of product. And that had 2 impacts. Number 1, it meant that they were missing out on some queries from a search engine point of view. And number 2, it meant that on-site search was compromised because people were searching and not finding the products that they wanted. So product visibility in the digital shelf was lower than it could have been. So the impact of not understanding shopper language is struggling to rank for all appropriate queries and having product visibility gaps. And the solution is to do proper query language research and challenge how you refer to your categories, your products, and update your product category naming conventions if you need to. Don't be stuck with what the business says it should be. Go with what customers are looking for, because that will help you to be more visible. And it doesn't mean changing your internal reporting classifications. It just means, how does your website use languages and labels in order to attract the right queries and get pages visible, and also surface products to users when they visit the site. So if we moved on to the second tip, maximizing use of product attribute data. And this for me is an absolute sin on e-commerce to not do this. Some sites do it brilliantly, others just completely fail. And it's about thinking about all of the different facets of your product. And Maria talked about this a bit around the product page, and you think about how you describe the product to enrich descriptions. It doesn't have to be long paragraphs. It can be very simple bullet points. Electrical retailers have been adept at this for years. The likes of AO.com have such rich specification and attribute data, and then they use that, A, to help build on-page content from an SEO point of view, but B, to drive improved on-site search visibility for really specific long-tail queries. So the impact of not thinking through full attribute sets is reduced visibility for some long-tail queries. Now, individually, there might be small volume, but when you aggregate them all, you actually realize that you're missing out on quite a chunk of search traffic. And then the other bit is when people come onto the site, those products are not as relevant because they're not giving people as much information as they need, which could normally leads to reduced engagement. People drop back out, and obviously that's not a very good quality impact for your site. So it's really important, think through all the different types of query related to your product and where you're seeing an attribute missing. And a good example, so the screens on the right are from a project I did with Colgate, working with their US e-commerce team on why they weren't getting visibility on one of their retailers. And we realized that their lack of visibility on Walmart was also causing lack of visibility for product in search. And it's because they didn't have attribute data on the product details page. And that was partly down to Walmart not allowing them to upload attributes separately, whereas other sites like Kroger did. So all they did is look at enriching their product descriptions, as Maria said in her points. So really important to think about all those attribute points. Cool, let's move on to number 3, indexing valuable filtered pages. Now, some platforms by default, when you set up your category structure, you might have 1, 2, 3 levels. You've got optimized URLs. They're all indexable. Great. You're there for predominantly kind of head and mid-tail queries. But then you've got filters on all these list pages, and these filters create an exponential number of sub-URLs. Now, some platforms by default put all of those filters after a hashtag and make those basically non-indexable. So it's really important to check what's happening with filtered pages, because if all of those filters are creating non-indexable URLs, you might be missing out on valuable pages that hit some of the mid and long tail queries, which are compromising your overall search visibility. So it's really important to stop and think, let's not open them up and make everything indexable, because you could suddenly just chuck thousands of low value, thin content pages into the search index. But it's about which of those filters and filter combinations create meaningful list pages that you want to then get indexed because there's a decent search query demand for it. But also your merchandising team then have a really good content play on the site where they can, customize the product listing, they can add content, banners, do marketing campaigns and use them as landing pages. So the solution is auditing the query universe properly and working out where filters are being searched for properly and have good volume, and that volume is consistent, it's not declining and about to disappear. And then looking at schemas to apply controls so that you don't just suddenly open up every single filter combination. If you have 7 filters on a site, if a one shopper uses all 7 filters, you've suddenly created an exponential number of URLs. So you have to be very careful which ones you open up to index and which ones you don't. And then you also, I think the final comment is judicious use of canonicals, because sometimes people set auto canonicals up to the non-filtered URL. So you might automatically be compromising the value and visibility of those pages you've just tried to index. So you have to be sensible about all of the controls that can make these pages visible. Moving on to tip number 4. And this is structured data hit list. So again, Marie, you talked about the importance of structured data on product details pages. What I find when working with teams around like statements of work for replatforming is they'll focus on what maybe one area of structured data like product reviews or markup for product pages, but they won't think about the full remit of what structured data enables. So you can go into schema.org and I don't know how many hundreds or thousands now of different potential markups there are, but there's a lot for e-commerce, and depending on what your product to market is, there are different ones coming in. Online grocery recipes is a classic one. That really helps them with their content strategy to get better visibility for the content, to pull people into like non-commerce journeys, and then they cross-promote products in there to get people into product journeys. So the impact of not thinking about structured data is compromising your page quality, because you might not have the best data, A, for customers, but B, for search engines. And then you reduce search impact because the search engines can't display those snippets in the search, which can give you make you more visibly attractive than other listings. So therefore it might be impacting your click-through rates. So I always say create a hit list of structured data that's relevant to your site, then map it to the individual pages to know what data should be on each page, implement it, and then the most important bit is validate, because there's still plenty of sites with structured data implemented, but it's broken, and broken data doesn't look good either from a quality point of view. So you've constantly got to monitor it, look in things like Search Console. You might have had perfect implementation when you go live, and then somebody's done a big release and it's just absolutely buggered your review structured data, and all of a sudden you've got loads of warnings. So stay on top of that, because things do change. Cool. And then on to the last tip. Yeah, so number 5, Q&A research, expanding product content. So there's 2 bits to this. And number 1 is that a lot of product copy doesn't answer shopper questions. You might have a brilliantly, beautifully written product description on your page, and it might be completely on brand, but actually might be questions that shoppers have, especially new shoppers who aren't used to your brand or haven't bought that product before, that aren't answered. Now, if they need to answer that question, where do they go? Maybe you have live chat that helps cover that. Maybe people go off and do searches back into Google. Maybe people find that answer somewhere else, and you're lost out of the journey. So it's really important, because there's potentially hundreds of really low volume specific questions, which when looked at aggregate and when looked at a topic cluster level can represent a pretty decent kind of query volume. I did some work with Samsung on this. So they were trying to grow traffic to their direct-to-consumer site. They were obviously trying to build traffic to their traditional channels through retail partners. They didn't want to compete with retailers, because that can obviously create channel conflict. So what we looked at is Q&A search, where people were asking things like, what's the safest fridge freezer? What's the noisiest fridge freezer? And we built them into topic clusters and looked at the kind of content that could be built on their product pages and their D2C site that would give them value add and get them traffic into their site that was not going to be competitive with all their retail partners, who would obviously get a little bit upset if they took all of their commerce traffic. And the other example I've got on there was a jewelry client that built out on category pages FAQ blocks to help target some of the questions related at a category level, so to drive more traffic into those. So this is things quite simple once you've set up the block to then replicate across whichever pages where you're seeing question and answer gaps that you could plug. And one of the important benefits of this is so much Q&A stuff ends up going down into like expert sites. Maybe it's like, which answer in A, what's the best, or it's on Quora and it's not traffic going into e-commerce, even though it's an e-commerce related query. So e-commerce teams need to think about this, because the more you can get people when they're in that questioning phase and research phase and get them into the consideration set and thinking of you, then it's not a be all and end all, but it does help to kind of bring people back when they're at that purchase stage. So those are my 5 tips, and I'm going to hand over now to Larissa.
Thank you, James and Maria. So I want to talk about UX and SEO and the cooperation between those, because for us as SEOs, a good cooperation with UX is crucial. And this is even more so in e-commerce, because it's harder to get an idea of who your user actually is. And there's actually a lot of information that UX and SEO can exchange, and where we can both benefit from that data. The UX information that we as SEOs can use, next slide please, is basically how users behave and navigate through your website, but also what are the standard practices on the web. Because this is information that you can then use in your internal linking, your categorization, your taxonomy. So if you look at the example here from the travel industry, so I translated it from German to English, there are 2 types of breadcrumbs, and you can see that the first one starts with basically a package tour, so the kind of travel, and then goes into the destination, whereas the second one starts with the destination and then goes into the travel type. So this also depends a lot on like how your website is set up, how your users perceive your website, etc., etc. And UX can help you understand this. Then when it comes to how users perceive your brand, you might have a certain expertise or authority that you think is really obvious, but UX can help you to find out if your users see this the same way. If this is not the case, you have to see if you can align this better or adjust your strategy. And this is something that you can also then use again in link building campaigns. So if you really want to, basically, you have a high-end fashion website and you feel that users don't, or you see that users don't see it that way, it might help to get backlinks from high fashion magazines or influencers. And then UX has personas, which are kind of fictional representations of your users. It gives you information on their background, their likes, their dislikes, etc. And you can use this information to give instructions to your content team or to use in your metas. So you can see here 2 different web pages for men's sweatpants. And you can see that Canterbury uses a very different wording than Harrods for the same thing. So Canterbury speaks about free delivery, whereas Harrods speaks about complimentary delivery. And this is a different kind, they have a very different kind of user base. And if you do this correctly, it will increase your CTR and will help you get not just any kind of traffic, but the right kind of traffic that is going to be happy at your website and will actually convert. But there's also information that we as SEOs have that are actually very helpful to our UX team. So one of the things that I would advise you to show your UX team is the PHP Insights tool. There's, for most websites, field data in there, and these are actual user data. And the best thing is it's for free. And it's important for your UX team to know this, because if they do user tests and they see that they lose a lot of users and your website is performing really, really bad from a speed perspective, this might be related. And the other thing, the other reason that you should show this to them is when you have problems getting page speed improvements prioritized, for your UX team, it's probably also very important. So if you try to convince your stakeholders together, you have a bigger chance of succeeding because you're just 2 against, or you're 2 people instead of 1. Next slide, please. Then when it comes to long tail keyword research, this gives a lot of information on the kind of topics, but also elements that you should have on your pages. So when we look here, for example, for the query vacation Croatia, there's questions about where to spend vacation Croatia, where to do vacation in Croatia. And of course, you can use this in your written content. But if you discuss this with your UX team, they can help you include this in the right kind of way. This can be either a linking widget that links to several specific pages about regions in Croatia. It can be just a general overview of the regions in Croatia, maybe a map. And this can also then help them make their pages more user-friendly. And then as SEOs, we also spend a lot of time looking at the top ranking players in our markets, and there might be common elements that you see everywhere. And I would really advise you to show this to your UX, because in general, if it performs well in search, it means that it is important for the user as well. Next slide, please. So then to basically wrap this up, I want to kind of discuss like how you can improve your collaboration with your UX team, because it can be quite challenging. So first is to really learn the basics of UX and get a better idea of who your users are. And then be part of user interviews and tests so that you get a better idea of who your users are. But you might also be able to ask them questions like, hey, do you prefer this kind of meta, or do you prefer this, and why? Then set up a channel to exchange articles or information that's relevant for both teams. Not just exchange it, but also always explain how you interpreted something. This improves the knowledge level in both teams, but it also helps you to communicate better and more and opens doors. And then what I always try to steer away from is using things like SEO content and SEO text. Actually, when I say those words, I start to like get slightly nervous, because this gives the feeling that SEO is just some sauce that you add on the product when it's finished, whereas we actually, as SEOs, we want this to be part of the product. So you should always discuss, okay, what benefit does it bring to a user? Because it is important to a user, Google has included it in the algorithm, and that's why pages who do this well probably rank better. Then make an SEO for UX checklist with explanations, just a topic, what does it mean, why is it important for SEO, maybe some extra reading material. This again makes you more approachable, but it also makes sure that things get implemented correctly from the start, which saves you a lot of time repeating the same things all over again. Then show your UX Google documentation, like the quality radar guidelines. There's a lot of information in there about what users like and dislike on the web in general. And because this is what users like and dislike, it's also important for you for Google. And then the last thing that I would advise you to do is to just have a cup of coffee or tea with your UX and get an idea of where they come from, and also what their conceptions and misconceptions of SEO are. Because maybe they learned SEO in 2010 and they learned that keyword density is important, and that's basically it, and we need to hide text at the bottom of the page. Whereas nowadays, SEO is more a core part of the product. And if you can get a better understanding about this, again, it's easier also to talk to each other and work together.
Great, thank you very much, Marissa, James, and Larissa. We've got some questions ourselves, so I'm going to pass over to Carrie to ask them.
Great, thank you. So we have a question here from Maria. You showed us a screen grab at the start of Google Search Console, and it looked like there were 160,000 URLs that were excluded, no index. That's a lot of URLs. Does this negatively impact a site?
Yeah, definitely. So this was when the client came to us and we did the first technical audit. This is what we found, and absolutely, they were having all of many different issues with indexation. So many of them, they had no index because of certain duplication problems. Another ones, they had been canonicalized. So, for example, I think they had around I think that, yeah, the 9,000 product URLs that were excluded and found as duplicate were actually, they were using canonicals to try to help solve this problem between color duplication. But Google was actually, because canonicals are hints and are not directives, Google was ignoring them, and they were actually ignoring these canonicals and choosing different canonicals, for example. So the colors that they decided to be indexed were not indexed. Well, not all of them, but some of them were not indexed, and many of the ones that they had decided to not to be indexed were actually indexed instead. So they had many site architecture issues that we started tackling, and actually saw very good results out of solving indexation issues and also crawl budget issues.
Great, thank you. That's really useful. And James, can you just confirm how best to work out questions your potential clients might be asking or are asking?
Yeah, sure. So the tools that granted, I'm not an SEO expert, so there are far smarter people out there doing all the keyword research than me, but the two I've used and found easy to use is SEMrush, because you can specifically drill into question-based queries and Answer the Public. Answer the Public is brilliant, but you do need to pay for the license because you only get a couple of free searches a day. So that might work for some really small businesses, but if you want to do it at scale, you need to invest a monthly license. But Answer Public's great. It gives you on the slide, the one I showed you, it gives you the wheel, which links you to like the how, who, what, etc. And what it does really nicely is if you do it at topic level, and if you understand your topic first, say for example, we were looking around fridge freezers and we wanted to exploit any content opportunities that none of the retail base were doing. We just started to play around with fridge freezer, American fridge freezer, best fridge freezer, all sorts of different queries to try and get an understanding of where there might be questions we hadn't thought about. And from there, we started to identify where there were commonalities. There were suddenly 7 or 8 questions related to noisiest fridge freezer. Then you can go and take that research back into Google, Bing, whichever search engine you're looking at, and now start to look at the SERPs and look at what's there and what's answering it and how well it's answering it and who are you up against and how complex would it be in order to rank highly for authoritative content. So that's how I generally do it. So those two tools together give you a good idea. The great thing with Answer Public at the moment, unless I'm wrong, doesn't give you the keyword volumes, but you can export the data in CSV, and then you can import that into a tool like SEMrush, and then you can get all your volume-based metrics as well to start understanding the size potentials. And then obviously you can look at trends and see whether particular queries are popular at particular times of year, etc. So hopefully this is the question.
Sorry. Yes, it does. Thank you very much. That's very useful. And finally, we've got a question for Larissa. What happens if your page does not pass the Core Web Vitals assessment?
So in general, it just means that users do not have a good experience on your page when it comes to speed-related issues or just in general user issues like interactivity. This might might lead users to bounce off just because your page is loading too slowly, and especially when you're performing bad on mobile phones. What you have to realize is that a lot of people check out e-commerce pages or just want to do some online shopping when they're on their way to work, and they might not have the best of connections. So if your speed performance is bad, you might lose a lot of users, and you're also providing a bad user experience. Great, thank you.
I think that's all we have time for questions for today. And I think if we have any more questions, we'll post them on Twitter for you guys to answer. And I'll hand back over to Joe. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. You all gave very in-depth recommendations about what to do with e-commerce sites. So very, very useful indeed. Thank you all for giving up your time, and thank you to the audience for joining us. We're going to take a little bit of a belated half-term break. So we're going to be back here on November the 12th. We're going to be talking about SEO reporting with Steph Watley, Christopher, and Barb. Another international tea time SEO. Barb will be joining us from the US, Christopher from Denmark, and Steph from UK. So thank you everyone for coming and always supporting. Tea Time SEO, and really hope that you have stay safe Halloween. And we will see you in 2 weeks' time. Thank you all for joining.
Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you.